By special request and popular demand, in this video I'm going to spill the beans on my long recording career, which dates all the way back to 1981, when I was a fresh-faced 21-year-old, full of optimism, full of beans, with a full head of hair, ready to take on all challenges that lay ahead of me. Here we are 42 years later, and I'm still looking forward to wherever my musical career takes me. Now this is a long story, so get yourself a drink and some snacks, strap yourself in and enjoy the wild ride, hopefully, as much as I have. Now I'm not going to talk about demo sessions and bands that didn't get off the ground, not in this video. I might make a separate one about those sessions at some point. No, this video is strictly about recording work that got an official release and was made available to the public for money. Remember when you had to pay for records, tapes and CDs? Some of it is still available. I'll put links in the description below the video. And if you enjoy what I do, please like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel and switch on the notifications. All of that helps me to carry on doing this. Thanks. So, on with the show. Let's go way back to the world-famous Marquee Club in London's fashionable West End. May the 29th, 1980. I went up west to see Robert Fripp play guitar with his band The League of Gentlemen. At that show I got talking to a certain Mark Sebastian Jones, a charismatic young face about town who turned out to live not far from me in South London. We exchanged numbers and pretty soon we formed a band called Transition with a synthesizer and drum machine boffin from Battersea called David Knight. The three of us bonded with our shared appreciation for British art rock and glam rock, David Bowie, Roxy Music, T-Rex, King Crimson and so on. We did our first gig at the Two Brewers pub in Clapham High Street, playing support to my friend Andy Drudy's band, which was called Triad. Now David Knight had his own band called The Fast Set. That band was on hiatus at the time, so David recruited Mark and myself and The Fast Set was reborn. We started gigging at places like Billy's Club in Soho, where we came to the attention of a DJ and budding music business entrepreneur called Steve-O. We were very much a part of that early 80s scene at the cutting edge of popular music, experimenting with electronics combined with poetry. Steve-O started a record label called Some Bizarre and asked us to record something for a potential compilation album release. So with a tiny budget, we booked into an 8-track recording studio and recorded King of the Rumbling Spires, which was a cover of an early T-Rex single when Mark Bolan's band was still called Tyrannosaurus Rex. We assumed that this album would come out as a low-key indie release, so instead of giving Steve-O one of our own compositions, we gave him this cover version. To our surprise, Steve-O and his label did a deal with Phonogram, one of the major record companies at that time. This album, Some Bizarre Album, came out and got into the national album charts. So my recording career started with a bang, and we got to play some high-profile gigs, including the Lyceum Theatre in London. And my story features more releases with both Mark and David later, so stay tuned. Through David, I got to know Brad Day, mainly a drummer, but also a composer and songwriter. Brad had a neo-psychedelic band called The Third Eye and needed someone to play bass guitar. So my very first single release, and also my very first release on bass guitar, was this lovely single, Pass Myself by The Third Eye, released in 1982 on Scarlet Records, which was Brad's own indie label. We never did any gigs, and that was the only recording that was released. Eventually, copies of the single started being sold on eBay for lots of money as a rare collectible record, but it was also released many years later in 2016 on a compilation CD album called Another Splash of Colour. That one's also on Spotify. What a great song it is. I'm still really proud of this one, and I'm still friends with Brad to this day. In fact, I teach guitar to Brad's son. Mates Rates, of course. Remember Mark Sebastian Jones from the Fast Set? In 1983, he was invited to contribute a track to an indie compilation album called Directions, and the track he chose was called Prince of Passion, which was one of our old recordings back from when we were still called Transition. I played guitar and bass guitar on that, if I remember rightly. Mark gradually drifted away from music, and I believe he moved to Japan. The Fast Set sort of fizzled out as David was very much in demand to record and gig with other artists. One of these was Danielle Dax, and I'm happy to say that David and Danielle are still collaborating on musical projects to this day. My role was that of session guitarist and bass guitarist, and one of the first things I did with them was the single Cat House. Here's the 12-inch version, which is still very popular with Danielle's fans. The single release did very well in the indie charts at the time. In 1987, it was also released on an album called The Chemical Wedding, together with two other tracks on which I played called Touch Piggy's Eyes and Whistling for His Love. On Touch Piggy's Eyes, playing the blues harmonica was a certain Chad Strentz, one of my oldest and best friends, and there's more about Chad in this story later. And on Whistling for His Love, I played a sitar for the first time ever. Those three tracks also came out on a compilation album later called Comatose Non-Reaction, The Thwarted Pop Career of Danielle Dax. Meanwhile, I contributed guitar and bass guitar to a track called White Knuckle Ride for David and Danielle, which came out on her album called Dark Adapted Eye. That song was later re-recorded as a single, but another guitar player got that job. In 1989, I was invited by my friend Chad Strentz to join a rhythm and blues band called Shout Sister Shout. I was already a fan of theirs, so I was delighted when Chad asked me to join as, wait for it, keyboard player. I was at best a beginner on keyboards, but I loved the band, so I would have played the triangle if they'd asked me. We became the Friday night resident band at a now legendary London gig venue, Bob's Good Time Blues at the Station Tavern. We also gigged at regional clubs and even made it across the channel to France and Switzerland. We were a really good tight band with an enthusiastic following, and for a few years there was a real buzz around us. I remember some of those gigs as my happiest times on stage ever, and I love both recording and gigging. Gradually, I was allowed to start bringing a guitar along to gigs. Eventually, I stopped bringing the keyboard. But not before we recorded this 12-inch EP. I play either keyboards or guitar or both on all 6 tracks. What a band. More about them later. In 1990, Danielle Dax got her big break and signed to Sire Records for the album Blast the Human Flower. So we're back on a major record label. I play lots of guitar, both electric and acoustic, as well as bass guitar, and we worked with a name producer for the first time, Stephen Street, and recorded in a big 24-track studio with a decent budget. I'm on 5 of the tracks of that album, which are The Id Parade, Big Blue 82, King Crack, Dead Man's Chill, and Daisy. That's the one with my acoustic guitar. I love how it sounds. Also in 1990, I went into a studio with Shout Sister Shout, this time to record a whole album. I play mainly guitar on this one, which came out as a cassette-only release at first. Here's one of the original tapes. Many years later, we had some copies pressed up as CDs to coincide with our legendary reunion gig at the Dublin Castle in 2017. All good things come to an end, and when Chad was tempted away from the Sisters by Paul Lamb and the Kingsnakes, I was temporarily bandless. I had been doing some dep gigs for a Brighton-based singer called Harry Lang, so we formed a new band called Bluer Than Blue. Eventually, in 1996, we released this CD album called Through the Storm. A pretty good band which did lots of gigs at pubs, blues clubs and festivals. But having been spoiled by my time in Shout Sister Shout, I was dissatisfied with Bluer Than Blue from a musical point of view, as was Harry, so in 1999 we disbanded and started again, and this new band was called Mo Indigo. As before, Harry booked us into as many gigs as he could find. I also founded my home studio here in the heart, the very vortex of the South London Blues Delta. I learned my engineering and production skills by recording this album, We Accuse the Blues. For the first time ever, this release includes a couple of songs that I co-wrote, dating back to my time with Shout Sister Shout. And it was also the first session where I recorded a horn section, and I even got for the first time to sing lead vocals on one of the tracks. There were various lineup changes in Mo Indigo, especially with drummers. The drummer is the beating heart of any band, and it's important to find a good one, but that's very difficult. Our best drummer in Mo Indigo was Ron Rosing, an American from Chicago who was living and working in the UK for a while. Ron recruited my help for a side project, a multimedia artwork by a collective led by James Teitelbaum called Left Orbit Temple. Here's the album, which is called Prelusion. I still love the classical guitar part I contributed to this track, Honu. My last recording project with Harry Lang and Mo Indigo was this album, Beatles Blues, which was entirely Harry's brainwave. All of the songs are covers of songs by the Beatles, but rearranged and reimagined to bring out their bluesiness. I play on 8 of the tracks with a variety of guest singers. We promoted the album with a gig at the London Arena in Docklands, before going on a Europe-wide tour with 2 of the singers, Earl Gaines and Al Garner, both from Nashville. In fact, we travelled to our first show in Belgium on a day that has gone down in history for all the wrong reasons, September the 11th, 2001. We arrived at the Belgian promoter's house and were ushered in to watch the devastating news on his TV. Scary times. But it was a successful tour, culminating in a show at London's iconic, historic 100 Club, which by amazing coincidence I'm back playing there tonight with Sister Cookie. More about Cookie later. But being in a band with someone doesn't necessarily make you friends. And on our European tour, I managed to fall out with Mo Indigo's keyboard player. Harry the singer took his side rather than mine, and that was the end of our many collaborations. But onwards and upwards, I took advantage of my old friend Chad Strentz's leaving Paul Lamb and the Kingsnakes to form a new R&B band which we called Breakout Blues. We recorded our album Drunk and Homeless in my home studio and played some well-received gigs, including the album launch at the 100 Club. But Chad was tempted to rejoin Paul Lamb's band, and that was the end of that. After 2002, there's quite a big gap in my record releases. That doesn't mean I wasn't busy. For a start, I helped raise my 2 children, both of them long since grown up and fine musicians in their own right. I also found time to continue gigging with bands, as well as the occasional recording session, but as far as I'm aware, none of those got any kind of official release. Until 2018, when I was asked to do some session work for a wonderful artist with a compelling, gravelly voice called Wiley Bo Walker. I contributed lead guitar to his track Did I Forget for the album Almost Transparent Blues. A few years later in 2020, I played on the tracks Drive and Time to Forget You on another of Bo's albums called Ain't No Man a Good Man. Here's the deluxe version. Also in 2020, I finally appeared for the very first time as one of the credited artists on this album, which I'm very proud of. Again, it's recorded in my studio, and I co-wrote and co-produced all the tracks with one of my favourite singers ever, the wonderful Katie Bradley. Katie works with the very best in the British blues business, and I'm so honoured to have collaborated with Katie on this one. We get to play some excellent gigs as well with superb, classy musicians. And it's the first indie release from my own label that's actually made a profit. It's still available. Get a copy while you can. Despite COVID-19 and the lockdown, 2020 turned out to be quite a busy year recording-wise. Musicians like me, of course, lost our ability to do gigs and perform live for the public. So we harnessed technology and switched to remote projects and online collaborations. One of these was the Lockdown Lucky Band. Gary Williams is a big supporter of the London roots music scene, so he posted on Facebook an invitation to musicians to collaborate on some new recordings to raise money for charity. I volunteered together with Chad, as well as several other musicians based at their homes in and around London. We all used whatever home recording and filming facilities were available to us and wrote and recorded several new songs for which we also made videos, which are on YouTube. Gary also arranged for us to record a glam rock cover version for this charity release, Blockbuster. We recorded our version of I Can Do It, originally by the Rubettes. Here's another release I'm very proud of. In the Blue Corner by Sister Cookie, available on both vinyl and CD since 2021. This gets a lot of radio play, and promoting it has taken us all over the country and to festivals in Europe. Come and see us, it's a great show. Cookie's one of the most charismatic artists I've worked with a stage presence that magnetically attracts fans and followers from miles around. And she's a great songwriter. Now, this next one gave me a rare opportunity to sing in a backing vocal choir. It's a track on my friend Vegan Queen V's debut album released in 2022 called Freedom Warrior. As many of you know, like Queen V, I'm a committed, passionate vegan, and on this album she advocates for animal rights and human rights too. So again, I'm privileged to have helped out with my small contribution to this superb album. And this 2022 release is the fruit of another project from my home recording studio. I'm privileged to be one of the regular guitarists in this London-based band, Pete Bolter and the Bluematics. I'm on 3 of the tracks on this album, and I play regularly with these guys at the Ain't Nothing But the Blues Bar, once again in London's fashionable West End. There we have it, my recording release career so far. You can bet that I'm not done yet. I can't wait to see where my recording career takes me next. Thanks for listening. Remember that the best way you can support roots musicians is by going to our gigs and buying our merchandise. Yes, I know that people expect music to be free these days, what with Spotify and the other streaming platforms. But you should still support independent musicians, because what would life be like without music? Thanks again. Bye for now.